Hello everyone, Dr. Shabazz here, and I want to give a fresh review of chapters 1 through 3. I have a review on that Canvas post. You may have looked at it, but I wanted to give another one because there are some things I wanted to say that are not in the review that I did a few years back. And I also wanted to go through some of the questions from the quiz. I have it somewhere here on one of the windows that I have open, and so we'll do that. And I'll just kind of go through this outline that you see here, which includes videos, video reviews. Um, hopefully, hopefully, you have watched these videos. And I say that because students swear by the videos, not because they're exciting or entertaining, but I think when you're absorbing material uh, like what you have in global business is multifaceted and is very new. Most of these things you will not have encountered, and it takes a bit of time to absorb a lot of these concepts, even though they're not hard to grasp. They're relatively easy to understand. They do require some type of reinforcement. This is why I actually had us to go through four different cases. So Cheeseless Cheetos in China is a case. McDonald's in India is a case, which is actually on the chapter 1 video. The other side of outsourcing is also a case. And life and debt is also a case. And guess what? They all dealt with globalization, some aspect of globalization. They also dealt with the global economy. They dealt with different factors that impact the global economy. They dealt with ways in which globalization impacted society, impacted culture, impacted the local economy, impacted businesses, uh, uh, impacted uh, a number of different industries as well. So, what I'd like to do is go through some of the questions. Now, each class had a different set of questions. And what I mean by that, they were not all different, but the ones on the journals were all different because there were different journals that were done in each class. So, what I will do is I will go through the first seven or so. I think all the seven questions are pretty much the same, but then there were three journal articles that each class had to do, and so I'll just go over the seven, and the other three that the journal articles, um, those are answers that won't really matter on the exam because you won't see those again. So for the sake of time, I'll just go over the first seven, which everyone had to do the same questions. And by the way, because all of my classes are global business, I typically would curve. I would add a curve, but I would base it on all three classes. So if someone in the third section got 100, then it would be based any curve that I give or any extra points I give would be based on that uh, that score. And typically, what happens is that people from the two sections, the earlier two sections, might give some intelligence to those in the third section, and they would have a higher score. Well, if you help them get a higher score, it's only going to hurt your chances because they'll get a higher score and there won't be any room for you getting a favorable result from a curve because they'll have the maximum score. So make sure you think about these things, and I'm pretty sure students don't really imagine uh, these things because you're not sitting as an educator and you don't know how these dynamics work. But if you're giving your peers and classmates questions to the quiz or exam ahead of time, you're helping them get a higher score. And if they get a higher score, they will set the curve. And if you help them to get 100, hopefully you got 100 as well, and it won't hurt you. But if you got a 70, then you're not going to benefit because there won't be any curve given because the top score will be 100. So my thing is rely on yourself. Don't rely on others to give you tips and help and ultimately lead you down a path that will make you feel entitled that you deserve to have these types of tools and aids so that you can get the highest score. And we all want high scores, but you want to make sure that you do the work to earn them, and that you don't resort to these types of actions. And those of you who are in the earlier sections, you want to make sure that you're not creating a very unethical culture. And of course, we've had problems with cheating, especially during COVID. That was a very, I guess you can say that was a learning period for all of us. And not being able to see students and not being able to observe them while they're taking the exam was a problem that we all faced in academia. So we're going to have a paper exam, and we will use the old-fashioned Scantrons. Those are not used all the time anymore. Some professors still use them. You will have at least one exam where you will bring your laptop in class and you will take your exam on a laptop in class. And that is a clean way and is a quick way to get a response in terms of feedback in terms of how you did. So let's go through these questions. The first 7, chapter 2, I'm going to just go and take the quiz. I'm really not sure if this is exactly what you see, but we'll go through it nevertheless. So question 1, countries that have been moving toward more open trade and free market policies are known as emerging economies. So those are economies that are not developing countries and they're not industrialized, but they're in the middle, and they have higher growth rates. So those are considered emerging economies. One of the most basic forms of exchange is classified as barter. Which of the following would not be considered a factor of production? Now remember the factors of production for output, or they call them factor endowments, that is land, labor, capital, and in some books, entrepreneurship. So it would not be trade. Technology is actually a factor of production because it's part of capital investments. So technology or machinery is used to produce, and that's part of capital. You're not talking about just money, you're talking about equipment, machinery, intellectual capital is also there. So trade is not considered a factor of production. It may be as a result. Trade may come about as a result of factors of production. In terms of you have your factors of production, you produce something, then you trade it. but trade is not a factor of production. The idea of a government putting specific requirements, quality, sanitation, packaging, size, weight, quantity to foreign imports is called protectionism. So when you have these requirements, these are considered non-tariff barriers. You have tariff barriers, which are taxes. You have non-tariff barriers, which could be quality requirements, sanitation requirements, packaging requirements, size requirements, weight, quantity, etc. Quantity can be in form of a quota, which is also a non-tariff barrier. So that would be protectionism. Number 5. And again, these are the ones that all classes had in common, and the other 3 were from the different journal articles, which each class had a different set. The other side of outsourcing, one man reflected on the family bond and how family serves as a safety net for the elderly. He found it tragic that some wealthier families now send parents to a nursing home or old people's home. I believe he used old people's home. But typically or traditionally, Indians will take care of their grandparents. They would live in the homes of the sons and daughters, and you would have several generations in one compound. And that was taken straight from the quote. In the other side of outsourcing video, Thomas Friedman was able to visit a call center that featured a class on accent neutralization, where they were practicing the nursery rhyme or whatever that was, that passage, and trying to get the accent. And she was helping them minimize their Indian accent and accentuate the American accent. The other side of outsourcing, this is from that video. At the very end of the video, the majority of the children stated they desired which type of career, and that would be STEM. That was a very, I guess you can say, inspirational. I guess you can call it an inspirational point in the video where these children were interested in such high-level types of careers. We talk about being an astronaut, a physicist, a surgeon, a pediatrician. All of these things are very, very high level when you start talking
the
about.
idea from the beginning was just to
When you start talking about what goes into making those careers.
have a place to come and hang out that's comfortable for everyone, and
Bingo. Nice work, Ethan.
It's going to
So here at the end, these kids, these are children of the lower caste, which is a pecking order in Indian society, which is outlawed, but it's still practiced, socially. These are children who are learning Microsoft Office, learning PowerPoint and Excel and all these other skills. And they look to be about 7, 8 years old. And we have students here in the US learning Microsoft Office at 18 years old and 19 and 20 years old for the first time. So it kind of shows you how serious these emerging economies are. And so you want to take note of this. And if you have to watch this again, you can do so. But I felt this was a very touching end because these children are now your peers. I'm sure if they're 7 or 8 then yeah, they probably would be a bit ahead of the age of the people in our classes, but certainly there's still competition. So again, I thought it was a very good lesson to see the ending of that and see the kind of aspirations that these children had. All right, so that will do it for the seven questions that each of the sections had in common. I'm going to continue on with the outline. And again, we saw the Cheeseless Cheetos article, which I hope you have read that. You should have read it by now because we had our first quiz, and that quiz had questions on Cheeseless Cheetos. So you want to read this. I've talked about it a few times. It's a very short read. And then the McDonald's video, which appears in this video. And I really hope I don't get a commercial. I might get a commercial, but yeah, you get a commercial.
When you buy music gear from Sweetwater, you get more than just what's in the box. A whole lot more. Every piece of gear we sell comes with an
lettuce from Holland, cheese from New Zealand, pickles from...
So if you go to this video, it talks about this idea of McDonald's going into India. Somebody had a bright idea, and as you look at the thumbnail on the lower right, I'm just going to run my cursor over it and kind of narrate what's going on. This is Jim Cantalupo, who was the president of McDonald's. He passed away back in the early 2000s. And here they took the menu and made some adaptations because the slaughter of cows is illegal in India, and the consumption of beef is discouraged and prohibited. They're bringing in new menu items. They would sample these, as you can see here. They would also help the farmers. And these are farmers that will supply McDonald's with their inputs. So the lettuce and the potatoes and the tomatoes and everything that goes into making the items on the menu. Irrigation systems, planning techniques perhaps. And then you have this idea of customer service. It is different when you go to McDonald's overseas. It's different from the McDonald's here, and not because of necessarily because of the wages or anything like that, but it's because the people who work for McDonald's abroad have a different sense of purpose because they're working for an American company. Whereas people who work for McDonald's here just look at it as a low-end job, minimum wage, and maybe some of the workers have poor attitudes. And so we have kind of a negative view of those who work for McDonald's. But in other countries, it's looked at as a very reputable job to work at McDonald's or one of these franchises. And so, yeah, it's a very different type of, very different reality. So then you had a scene, and you can see it on the backdrop here, where the Saudi Big Mac was made by getting these inputs from different parts of the world. So they had a map, and they showed you where all of the inputs came from. And why do the inputs come from these countries? Well, in Saudi Arabia, obviously they don't do much agriculture because of the desert, and they primarily focus on petroleum. So then they have to import these products from different parts of the world so they can have the inputs to make the products on the menu. So in this chapter 2, the evolution of global business, I went through this kind of simulation where I drew circles on the board and I showed the relationship between traders, positive sum and zero sum game, and what happens if you should have that situation. And sometimes you have to get a third trader involved. And so I went through this simulation to demonstrate barter. And then mercantilism, where you had the Spanish and the Portuguese who went around the world collecting exotic products. And then there was a journal article that talked about the globalization of cuisine. And it also gave some history, and it cited Columbus and Vasco da Gama, who collected different plants, different spices from different parts of the world, and it helped the European, I guess, palate expand and their cuisine to develop even more. Absolute and comparative advantage, you have these two concepts that I talk about in the review video, the other review video, where you have absolute advantage. This was, there's a book called The Wealth of Nations written by Adam Smith in 1776, where he talks about this idea of absolute advantage, which means if you have an advantage at producing, say, bananas, and let's say you can also produce pineapples, but you don't produce pineapples as efficiently as bananas. The saying goes that instead of using resources to produce pineapples, which you don't produce as good, take those resources, land, labor, and capital, and use those to do what you do best, which is bananas. So all those resources go to produce bananas, and your yield and your output of bananas will be much greater and more efficient. Let's say the pineapples that you now have outsourced to someone else, you outsource to someone who specializes in pineapple. So they're efficient at pineapples, you're efficient at bananas, you specialize in both, and then you trade with each other, right? That's the efficiency of absolute advantage. Comparative advantage is slightly different in that I can have an advantage in both bananas and pineapples. Let's say I produce both of them better than this trader, but I produce bananas much better and only slightly better than my trading partner. So the theory here is, despite the fact that you have advantages in both, you should still specialize in that which you have the greater efficiency. And so this is all based on output and production. So a slight nuance there in terms of absolute and comparative advantage. Adam Smith, 1776, absolute advantage. And then some 50 years later, David Ricardo came up with this improvement of comparative advantage. Then you have to factor endowment theory. If you are a land-intensive country or have a lot of land that's either massive in terms of its scope, or you have fertile land, then you should produce land-intensive products. If you have a lot of labor, whether it's skilled or whether it's unskilled, you should have labor-intensive services or products. If you have a lot of capital, a lot of technology, a lot of inputs, you should produce capital-intensive goods. Our irony is that in some cases, you have situations like a country like America, which is service-oriented, no longer producing a lot of manufactured goods. They can have many different labor-intensive products that they produce, land-intensive products that they produce. Why? Because they have a very efficient agricultural sector, probably more productive than manufacturing, because we manufacture cars, computers, many different items. When you talk about finished goods, machinery, this country has a lot of output, but it's service oriented, and it has very powerful labor intensive industries like agriculture. So there's some exceptions to the rule there. Then you have Porter's diamond, and he talks about the 4 factors that create a competitive advantage for a firm. And so you want to make sure that you have that. The most important aspect of chapter 2 is when you talk about tariffs and non-tariffs, which you should know very well here. This is self-explanatory. This MFN is most favored nation status, which you get if you are a favorite partner, a trading partner of a particular country, as long as it's not discriminatory, as long as it's fair, then you can have these relationships with other nations. You have tariffs such as specific taxes, and it can be based on size, quantity, and weight. I say category, but category as well, but also weight is, and you might have a combination of taxes based on a product that might be over a certain size, over a certain weight, and so you have to pay 2 taxes. Then you have ad valorem tax, percentage of value per unit, preferential duties, which kind of goes in with MFN. If you're a most favored nation partner, then you probably have preferential duties. Your tariffs are probably lower if you have any tariffs. You might have a tariff-free situation where it's a free trade zone, and you have most favored nation status, and you have a tax holiday or a tariff-free zone. Or you have preferential duties where your taxes will be lower than, say, another country who doesn't have as close of a relationship. Then non-tariff barriers where you have quality requirements, sanitation, packaging size, pesticide restriction. All of these things are non-tariff barriers, which means that you have to undergo some type of inspection, and these are things that could be more frustrating than, say, a tariff barrier, which okay, 4% tax rate. Can I afford it? Yes, I can afford 4%. Now you negotiate it, but let's say it's 4%, you pay it and you move on, right? But non-tariff barriers can be so frustrating because there are inspections, there are quality requirements, sanitation, pesticide restrictions, size requirements. These are things that may cause you to have to rethink your products and maybe redo your products if you want access to that market. So make sure you distinguish between tariff and non-tariff barriers. I cover that in this video as well. And then last but not least, this idea of regional integration. I talked a lot about NAFTA becoming the USMCA, which was a free trade agreement between Canada, United States, and Mexico. You have 5 levels of regional integration. We have not seen political union, but we've seen the free trade area, which I mentioned. NAFTA was originally a free trade area. It is still a free trade area, but is now called the USMCA. Customs union that has a common external tariff. Common market, where you have no internal taxes, a common external tariff, but then you also have movement of different factors of production, people moving through, equipment moving through, and so you don't have those types of restrictions. If you've ever traveled, you'll know that if you're part of the EU, there's a separate line for you to go through. So it's ease of movement. So you have that in a common market. Economic union, you have all of the other 3, plus you have a unification of economic and monetary policy, which we see in the European Union with the euro, which some of the nations out of the 27 European Union nations have adopted. Precisely 19 members have adopted the euro out of the 27. And here you have some of the different different regional groupings, some of which are not readily highlighted in the book, but these are some of the others. So this is the review I have here, and you'll notice I go through the some of the same things that I have gone through during this talk, and then go through this chalk talk again, and then go through chapter 3 here. So it's pretty much the same, and hopefully it is of some help. But I want to emphasize that you go through Life and Debt. Make sure you read that. Make sure you read the book. Chapter 3 talks about free trade zones, which we saw in Life and Debt. That you go through the slides, you read the book, you go through the slides, go through the videos, and then you should be good to go. You should be ready to go. But Life and Debt, the reason I take so much time to go through that in class is because it is a crucial video. And for the section 302, we did not get a chance to watch that in class because the audio did not work in the West Wing 206. So hopefully you have had a chance to look at that on your own and have been able to absorb some of the points. Unfortunately, we were unable to discuss it in class, but I think that once you watch it, you will have an appreciation of that documentary. So that's all I'm going to say. We're at about a half an hour, and I just wanted to give you that overview. You probably have already watched or are watching the review that I have here for chapters 1 through 3. And so come ready, come well rested. There will be a number of people who are not taking the exam, but I will be giving makeups on Tuesday in my office. That is when they will be held. So if you're going to the conference, make sure that when you go to your rooms in the evening, that you take a peek at some of your material. If you're on the plane or in the car, make sure you take a peek at the material. We all do it. Professors do it. We have to go to conferences, but then we can't come back and expect extensions on projects that are due for committees that we have to serve on. No, we have to do the work that we have to do, grade papers on the plane, in the hotel room, get it done, and then come back and not miss a beat. So I expect the same from those students who may not be taking the exam with us. So that's all I have to say, and on Monday we will be in the classroom. Make sure you bring a pencil. I will not have a pencil. I don't use pencils except for doing my house projects where I have to make marks, but other than that, I don't use pencils. I do use pencils to make the Scantron. That's about the only application for me. So bring a pencil, and hopefully we will be able to get these exams taken after Tuesday, and then I will be able to talk about them on Wednesday. I may not have the exams back on Wednesday, depending on the turnaround time of the testing center, but certainly I will keep you abreast of that. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you Monday, and study hard and take care. Bye-bye.